Does it feel like we're ready to start in terms of the people coming in the door?
Yes.
I think we have critical mass here.
Great. Critical mass, that's the magic word. Hi, everybody, welcome. This is meeting 19 of the West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force. I don't know if that feels, we should have a meeting celebration. But thanks everyone for joining. And we have a not super jam-packed agenda today. So we're hoping that today will be a good time for us to spend a little time talking to each other. And if it doesn't take 2 hours, then you'll get a little bit of extra time out of your day. So we'll kind of see what comes over the next couple of hours. My name is Angie Thompson, the facilitator for this group. And just as we're getting started, I wanted to remind folks who may be listening on our streaming service that if you would like to make a comment about something that you're hearing, you can do that at westseattlebridge@seattle.gov. So that's still an opportunity for you to engage in the conversation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Nichols, one of our co-chairs.
Thank you, Angie. Just a couple of items. The agenda should look very familiar to you. We're going to get an update on the bridge and the process. We're going to talk a little bit about the low bridge and the implementation of the various mitigation projects. However, there was big news last night with the low-level bridge, and so I wanted to ask Heather if she would take just a minute to let us know what happened and why and where do we go from here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Nichols. Sorry, it took me a second to unmute myself. So last night, there was a little bit of a mechanical issue on the tail lock, which is the thing that keeps the bridge closed when it is open for surface traffic. And we worked throughout the night to fix it and make sure that it could be used again. This is part of what we are going to investigate and repair as part of the high and low bridge repair project that we are finding a contractor to do right now. So that will be addressed. It's an intermittent problem, but as soon as we have a chance to fix it as part of the bigger project, it won't be a problem again.
Great, thank you, Heather. We've talked
with a question from Deb before you move off that topic.
Just curious, was there also something going on? Well, this was an unplanned closure and buses were rerouted. I understand there was also something that happened on West Marginal.
There was an accident on West Marginal, I think.
Right. Can you speak to that, Heather, at all? I mean, obviously that wasn't planned either, but.
I believe there was a single car crash where the vehicle ended up on the railroad tracks and closed West Marginal for a little bit this morning as well.
Yikes. Thank you.
Okay, any other before, so we all know how to use the Zoom. Obviously, Deb showed us how to do the hand raise, thank you. With that, I will pass it on to my co-chair, Paulina, to solicit some reaction and thoughts from all of you.
Bill, and perhaps you can take the PowerPoint off for this portion, but hello everyone, welcome to our 19th meeting. Always a pleasure to be in your company and discussing important issues that are directly impacting us as community. So thank you for allowing the space to be with us. And so we always want to make sure that we acknowledge your presence here and we allow for some community participation before we dig into all the technical presentations and aspects. So if you would like to share with us anything that is going on in your community, about the West Seattle Bridge impacts that you would like to share, this is the space to do it. We want to hear from you. Your voice is important. And so something that I could start by modeling it and hopefully hear from you, it's there has been a lot of concerns, for instance, here in South Park and Georgetown, I'm sure in your communities too, as a school have started the hybrid model. And because of the concerns we have on the speeding and the increase of traffic in our community. So that has been something that we have been doing offsite conversations, and not through this venue, but SDOT has been very responsive in what are the best ways that we can mitigate the speeding to protect our children as they are walking to school in our streets, and to make sure like safety is a priority number one for that particular reasons and the screens of traffic. So that is something that we have been talking about, and as well as seeing, like some of the implementation on the home zone that is actually, has a slowdown in the residential streets, closing down streets, which have been helpful. So just maximizing security on the main roads where, for instance, in South Park, it's Cloverdale, and in Georgetown, they have many because of Corson and East Marginal Way as well. So anybody else would like to share as community some of the either feedback on these presentations of meetings or whatever you have heard will be great. Thank you, Deb. Go for it. I don't see anyone else yet.
I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in here. I have three real quick things to share. I've heard generally low bridge access frustration, and as I'm sure we all have. Also frustration with the perceived lack of progress, which, people want to see the hammers and the sparks flying off the repair of the high bridge. And everyone's like, when is it going to start? When's it going to start? So I do a lot of talking about, here's the process, but yeah, that's an interesting one. But I just want to share my, how do I say it, concern. I attended a city council briefing and then on the funding, proposed funding for bridge repair and maintenance. And maybe it was me, but I just got a huge shock that there was no one from D1 West Seattle area talking about what it's like to have a bridge closed, and the huge preponderance of community leaders of different organizations for biking and walking and safety. Everyone wants that money to go to that project, and bridges be damned is kind of the perception that I got. So I was very disappointed in my, fellow Seattleites who didn't really understand that when a bridge goes down, when something happens to a bridge, it affects not just for things on wheels, but all the other folks. And so that is something that I just wanted to share with folks, that it was, bridges really, to many, aren't that important. And it was an eye-opener for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. I appreciate that feedback. I see that Heather has commented, and yeah, even when the construction starts, there won't be a lot to see because it must happen inside. Anyone else or any reaction to Deb's follow-up? This is your time, community. Anne, please go ahead.
Anne Higuera here. I'm getting the same questions that Deb is getting about what's taking so long. And I feel like I have a really good handle on the process and why it's taking the consecutive tasks that have to happen. And I feel like we've covered those really well in these meetings. I had somebody ask me though, what is actually wrong with the bridge? And like what went wrong and what specifically are we trying to fix? And we've talked about the methods for fixing it, but not really a root cause. I just realized I wasn't able to answer that question at all to the person who posed it to me. And it might be worthwhile just putting something out there for all of the community, explaining just sort of the nuts and bolts of what's happened, and in a way that's maybe more layperson's terms, and people will really understand. So.
Great point, Anne. And we did spend some time on the root causes at the beginning, but I can totally tell, like, as the time passed by, that how we address that in our talking points is very important. Sam or Heather, would you like to answer or bring anything in?
You know, Matt, I think Matt Donahue's on the call. Maybe, I mean, Sam, of course, if you want to talk, but it feels like maybe Matt is the right one.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I'm not sure if we want to get, and I hear that. I think it'd be useful for me to hear from folks and then figure out how we respond and sort of come back with more information rather than feel like we're in a interview sort of approach today. Because I think I agree that we've been talking a lot about sort of what has to happen, even some of what the root causes were, but so figuring out how we communicate that. So hearing from folks would be very helpful.
Yeah, the feedback that I got was, we heard about the stuck bearing, the bearing's fixed. Why is the bridge not fixed? So just people out in the community who normally would be using that bridge, who actually have a real vested interest in this bridge and getting back, still are really not understanding what's happening. So I'm not really expecting an answer right this moment. I'm just sort of giving the feedback with the idea that maybe SDOT can think about how to disseminate information in a different way that's pretty simple but very clear. So anyway.
It seems to me later this month, when the contractor is announced, that might be a good time to do a kind of a review of where we've been, what the contractor will do going forward, and what that underlying problem was, so that people, you're right, we're speaking to a parade. Different people at different times tune in and tune out, and having that kind of a summary, I think, would be helpful for the whole community.
Great call, Greg. Exactly, and I agree with you. Let's see. Let's move to West Seattle Chamber.
Sorry, Dan Austin.
Dan, that's right. Can you please introduce yourself? I was going to say. Thank you.
I must be logged in through the chamber account. Dan Austin with the West Seattle Chamber. The main things we've heard, and this actually got a lot of emails last night, was a lot of concern about the $20 car tax moving away from bridge funding. And so I agree with what Deb said there. I had a lot of members ask, like, hey, why are we building new infrastructure when we have stuff that's critically behind on safety? So I'm not sure. I'm on my phone, so I can't see which council folks have people in here. But the big thing I'm hearing from the community there. The other piece I think might be really helpful for SDOT is we get a lot of emails in asking why, oh my gosh, it's been a year, they haven't even hired a contractor yet. And everyone in this meeting knows why. We had to go through the technical everything. We get it. It might be a really powerful 1:20 or 3-minute video that can be shared on social media that SDOT could put together that could get out. Because if you don't sign up for the SDOT blog or actively try to follow it, you just create your own narrative. So I think it might bring a lot of understanding out for folks if there was some sort of social media push into the West Seattle area on why we are where we are and what it means moving forward. Because a lot of people just look at it and go, man, they're hiring a contractor right now. Like, these guys don't do anything. And then you have to sit and explain, like, no, there's a whole lot of work that goes behind this. So if there's a way to package that might be great for the communications team at SDOT to put together and get out outside of just the blog that they use.
Thank you, Dan. And we have talked about the need for sure and having a clear, consistent communication. And we did have discussed that, is it through the blog? But the questions that get asked always is coming to us, right? And as community members, and we're like, trying to put it all together. And for sure, that is a helpful tool to have once we realize the need for it. And hopefully this will go along with what Greg was saying. Any other?
There was a comment kind of that Deb made into the chat about Heather, it was directed to you, about whether there could be an ongoing video of the work that happens inside the girders, like some kind of a live streamy sort of thing, to just put that out there as an idea.
Yep, I saw that, and that's something that we'll talk with the contractor when we select him.
This is the time to talk about the impacted. Yes, that's community, John, Persac, to answer your question in the chat. So please, if you have something to share, this is the time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Paulina. John Persac, live in the Georgetown neighborhood, representing as such here. And some of the feedback that I've gotten is that after workers came in and installed the speed bumps for Orcas and Carlton, and thanks for that, by the way, it has been somewhat helpful. There hasn't been a lot of other activity here, and I know that there is a timeline for when other things are supposed to happen, but people are left wondering when that's going to take place. I know there's going to be some engagement with the community council, but I'm wondering if there's a way to expand some communication channels, maybe participation on the local Facebook group or whatnot. Maybe there's some ideas to sort of enhance that piece. And then also I want to bring up too that there's renewed interest in bike connectivity from Georgetown to downtown and Chinatown International District via SODO. And I know that there's a lot of motivated folks here in our neighborhood that really want to see those reprioritized. And it's tough because we don't have great organizations like the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce. We don't have a port authority. We don't have paid staff to advocate for us. So any sort of like traction and help we can get on some of those issues that are important to us would be really helpful, because we're all in this neighborhood, we're all volunteers, and I'm sure there's volunteers in other neighborhoods too, but here it's literally all volunteers. So I appreciate the time. Thanks, Paulina.
Thank you, John, for those important comments and feedback from community. This is why it's important to allow us the time. Okay, so I don't see any other hands up. Anyone wanted to respond or comment? So we're just going to move back to Angie Thompson, who's going to walk us through the next agenda item. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Paulina. So that was great to hear from everyone. I think what we're ready to do at this point is to kind of jump into the meat of it, if you will. I don't love that phrase, but so to start with bridge updates, and Greg is going to give those for us this time. Greg, are you here and online?
Yes, I am, Angie. Yes.
Great, Greg, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Great to see you again this month. And thanks again, just to repeat what Angie had mentioned, thank you for the feedback. I'm more than happy to work with our engineer, roadway structures, asset owner, communications team to put something together to further explain the root cause and leading toward the why we're taking so long at this point. So I'm more than happy to work on that. Today, I'm going to provide an update on the high and low bridge rehabilitation projects, as well as the other low bridge projects that I'll get to later. Right now, the GCCM, we are keeping pace with our aggressive schedule. So we are still ahead, maybe even a little slightly ahead of schedule, a few days to a week. But we're still on schedule. We have our independent technical peer reviews going on right now. We also have an independent cost estimate being verified, and we are getting closer to that 60% around July 5th. So that's great news. Our next update, like I said, will be on the 60%, and that is around July 5th or so. So our expectation is that we will have the contractor on board, which I'll get to in a minute here, and they will have input on that 30% submittal, so that we can incorporate that information into the 60% in July. As far as the hybrid stabilization, the phase 1 stabilization, as we've been saying for quite some time now, is performing as expected. Everything is correlating back to the models. The behavior of that bridge is performing as expected. So nothing to change there. And that, again, will inform the 60% and design moving forward, which is not going to be an impact to that design at this point. As far as contracting process, to go to the question earlier about why it is taking so long. So just off the bat, this is a federally funded project. There's a lot of steps to be careful that we're going through thoroughly so that we don't take ourselves out of eligibility for those federal funds. So we want to be cautious of that. And there's other reasons as well, but that is one of the main reasons. We are down to 3 firms. We've first interviewed 6 firms, and we've gotten through the interviews on May 10th, and now we are down to 3 firms, and those 3 firms will be submitting a price proposal tomorrow. Once we're through those price proposals, we will review those, combine that with the technical qualifications proposal in addition to the interviews, and have a combined highest performing score. And that contractor selection right now, we're looking for the bid opening for the price proposals to be on the 19th of this month. And then the final selection will be on the 24th. So we'll be ready to announce the final selection contractor who will be part of the team on May 24th. The community workforce agreement is still pending with USDOT approval, although through communications, we're feeling really confident that this is going to be approved and we're going to be able to implement this program on the project. And this is something we're really looking forward to. So there's good news there as well. Next slide, please. Okay, just this shows the schedules of the low and high bridge rehabilitation. It says preliminary design, but that is actually 30% design. We're well beyond 30% design now, so don't get alarmed by that. Actually, we're right on pace. If you can see there in the middle of second quarter, we've advertised and we're going through the selection right now. So this is pretty straightforward, and we're going to get into our construction into fourth quarter. I will share that we are accepting proposals, some great ideas on perhaps accelerating some of the early work packages to do some investigations out there on the bridge. So there is a possibility once we work with our WashDOT and FHWA partners to potentially start some early works packages to get going out there. But we'll see. This is something that we still need to determine once our contractor is on board. Nothing changes as far as the back end of that schedule as well. That was fine. Thank you, Angie. I just wanted to mention on the back end, nothing changes.
Greg, before you jump in, there's a
Sure.
question in the chat
Okay.
about the contractors are bound by a timeline. What happens if something is discovered that upends this timeline? And are there any incentives for them to finish early? So how you manage timelines overall?
So how we manage timelines is we direct the deadlines as far as the schedule and all the timelines that the contractor needs to meet. They're part of the specifications. They're part of the requirements that we put in our specifications that the contractor puts a price on and a proposal on. So we drive a lot of those timelines. As far as the second question, I'm not sure if I answered that fully. There was another part of that question I may have missed.
What happens if something's discovered that upends the timeline? I mean, that's happened. So what happens? Like, what happens if something unexpected?
Yes, well, obviously there is always a risk of something happening, especially, if there is a protest, for example, and we have a selected contractor and there is a protest, there's obviously going to need some time to and this is why we're moving so carefully and methodically through the process, is that we eliminate or at least minimize the risk of something like this happening. We as SDOT have been through this many, many times as far as bidding projects like this, and as well as the GCCM and our experience here. So we don't anticipate that. However, we are prepared to deal with anything that takes us sideways. One of the biggest risks right now, two of the biggest risks I'll mention that we are keeping our eye on is just the negotiation with the contractor to get to that final price. And so we already have ideas and tools that we could use to incentivize moving faster. And that's going to be part of the specifications as well. Some of them are more directive and others are more incentive in that there could be ways to incentivize monetarily if we need to, or other ways to have the contractor move faster. But let me just take a step back, because philosophically, the GCCM contract is a partnership. And so it is in the best interest of the contractor to work along with the owner and the engineer of record as one team to work through solutions together. And so we expect the contractor to be part of that as well. And any potential barriers or issues that come up from anyone, they'll be part of that solution brainstorming with us. So that is the beauty of the GCCM. So I guess in a short story, we don't see a lot of concern here, other than the two areas of a potential protest, which we don't expect, because we are moving so carefully through the process, and also through the possibility of not negotiating through some of the MAC construction costs, which also we don't see as a major concern, as well, with some of the information that we've included in our specs in our schedule. So we're just trying to minimize and trying to stay in front of those potential risks and coming up with tools and incentives to avoid them.
Greg, this is Deb Barker. By protest, I just want to clarify that you mean a protest by a contractor who didn't get the bid?
That is correct.
Thank you. There's all kinds of terminology for protest, and I just wanted to make sure I understood this one. Thanks.
Yes, I should have been clear about that. Thank you. And we've been, SDOT delivers a lot of capital projects, and we often come across protests if a bidder doesn't get the work, and they see something they don't like, they could, the process allows them to issue a request a protest or review information, which takes time, but it's part of the process. So again, one of our best tools to avoid that is to make sure we're being very careful through the process, and we're fair and transparent through all of it. And we get our finance and administrative services department, who is involved, who administers all of our public works contracts, to have oversight to make sure that we're also following all the rules and taking our time here. So we feel like we've been through this so many times. We've been through the protests in the past. We bring forward a lot of lessons learned to avoid this. And so we feel like we've minimized this in such a way, especially at how careful we're moving along here. The last thing we want to do is get caught up in that. So that's why we're moving carefully. But yeah, it is contractor protests we're concerned about. Or I shouldn't say concerned about, but it's one of the things that we often face as part of delivering our capital projects. So we're prepared. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. Low Bridge projects update. The controls project, as we all know, I've been reporting on this one. This is the system controls for the Lower Spokane Swing Bridge. This project also remains on schedule. We're going to be advertising this within the next week or two. This held up about a week or so, but the back end of the schedule has not changed. So we're still scheduled to complete this work by the end of the year. And like I said, second quarter advertisement. The hydraulic directional drill project, as well as the communications lines, are also part of this project. These projects are both tied at the hip. We need that system in there to do the switch over for the controls. So it's important that this project also maintains schedule. Although it's not directly on the bridge and is not so impactful, it is a critical path project that will drive the controls project. So we want to be have our attention close to this one as well. And the contractor for this one will be on board by this summer. We're going through the environmental permitting right now. So both are in good shape, again, to be completed by the end of the year. And we're working with our Port of Seattle and other maritime partners to stay close with them on a monthly basis to communicate out and get input and share information. The lift cylinder project is also a maintenance delivered project. This is not a public works contract. However, it is a crew delivered project and just as important as the other projects, as I mentioned earlier. This also remains on schedule. The lifting frame design is currently underway. We're going to have our engineer of record perform this lifting frame design. We need to fabricate and test that system before we actually implement it to replace the cylinder. So this is a critical path item, but it's well on its way, under design, and later to be fabricated. So just wanted to mention that, and I'll mention it again as we look at the schedule. The seals have arrived in April. Once it's repaired, we'll be able to ship it to the bridge for installation, again, using those new lifting frames. And by the way, these lifting frames are really gonna help roadway structures maintenance crews perform any future maintenance in a more efficient manner and timely manner. So this, in the long run, is a really good thing, not just for this project, but for future use by the roadway structures crews.
Greg, Commissioner Steinberg has his hand up with a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got in on the tail end of that last discussion about the bidding process. I did want to ask if there is an intention to include the liquidated damages as stiff as possible for late delivery of the project, if it's beyond a guaranteed delivery completion date with liquidated damages. And usually that goes both ways. Incentives, financial incentives are provided in some contracts to motivate and incentivize early completion. So I was just wanting some additional specificity about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberg. The liquidated damages are standard in all of our capital projects. It's a tool that is available. But as I explained earlier, we philosophically, we approach this project as a GCCM and as a partner with our contractor. And so it is not right now in our best interest, although the tool of liquidated damages and applying those are available to the city. We wish not to use this as an upfront resort. If anything, we'd like to reserve this as a last resort to pull out, but it is a tool. It is absolutely part of our contracts that we could use. However, we don't feel right now, especially as we want to build a good relationship with this contractor, we don't feel it's something that we even want to entertain right now, but it's available.
And Greg, just as a follow-up there was a question from Dan Austin about how long it takes the standard protest to settle. I missed that when you were finishing up that piece of it, but maybe you could, in your experience, how long it takes typically to settle a protest?
Protests can vary, again, depending on the standing of it, the grounding of it. It can vary. It can take between a month to 2 months or 3 months to resolve, depending on, I guess, again, the grounding of it. So it's time. It's nothing that takes only a week or 2 weeks. We would expect something like this to take at a minimum probably a month or so to get resolved.
Thank you.
If it should happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and can I just note, sorry to barge in here, but this is one of the reasons why we have to be so careful and deliberate as we go through the process of selecting a contractor. We want to make sure that we fend off any of those grounded protests. So just if anybody wants to know why it takes so long, it's because we're actually trying to save time.
Okay.
I keep moving, Greg. I think yeah.
Next slide. Okay, this shows low bridge improvement projects. Again, the low bridge, the controls is going to be advertised any day now within the next week. So we want to get that out there because it does have a long procurement and testing period. So we want to get that underway. But again, the back end of the schedule remains. The low bridge communications, again, most of the time is spent on the design and permitting, which is underway right now, but we are planning to advertise this one late summer. It's a short working day contract, so we don't expect the working day contract to take much very long, but it's the permitting that takes the time here. And then as you can see, the cylinder project, seals and repairs continuing, but that critical path nature of the design and procurement of the lifting frames is going to be very important. We want to make sure that that keeps moving along and the fabrication gets done quickly. And so our eyes are on this one because it could drive the schedule on the back end. So, but all in all, fourth quarter and toward the end of the year is when we're looking at wrapping all these projects up. We do have tools that we're looking at right now to, in case we get caught up in it with any of these projects, just being able to find ways to perhaps accelerate and save some time through the schedule. So we're looking into that right now and investigating that. Next slide, please. Okay, emergency vehicles. I know this question has come up in the past as to why could emergency vehicles use the high bridge in its current state of repair? And there's no easier answer to this because it's very complicated in nature. Whatever vehicles do use this bridge need to be in a controlled fashion. And when I talk about controlled fashion, I'm talking about maintenance vehicles and construction vehicles, vehicles that we know at a planned occurrence are going to be on the bridge. We can monitor it very closely. We can monitor the speed as well as the location on the bridge of where these vehicles go. So a few things here I wanted to just bring up. Each end of the bridge is locked to prevent unauthorized access at this point. So we would have to manage that access if we were to allow emergency vehicles, which it presents some other issues as well, operationally and from a cost standpoint as well, and safety, as we're going to have multiple contractors up there. Phase 1 repairs stabilize the bridge, but not to a level where it can take live traffic without the risk of additional cracking. Just talking to the engineer of record, a lot of tensile stresses are created by introducing live load to this bridge at this point, beyond the areas of the stabilization design. So we don't know how the bridge will behave beyond those points. So it's a risk that we would take introducing live load, especially at higher speeds, emergency vehicles, because the higher the speed, the more impact load on the bridge, and the impact load could have increased stresses as well. So it's a very delicate area. We don't feel it's worth the risk of introducing live load, especially in the form of fast moving emergency vehicles. And right now our maintenance vehicles and construction vehicles are only up there in a very controlled fashion. There's a small window for access. And as I mentioned earlier, even if we would introduce emergency vehicles, it wouldn't be very long before we'd have to take them off, especially if we're looking at getting early works packages and perhaps getting on that bridge early. So we just don't want to introduce another risk of safety and operational issues on that bridge if we can avoid it. And again, last bullet, keeping the risk low, both operationally, structural engineering standpoint, and also from a safety standpoint. So it's a very complicated question and answer, but all in all, we want to maintain a very controlled environment on that bridge at this time, so we don't do any more damage to the bridge than we need to, introducing other vehicles. So I think I'm finished. There's a next slide with some pictures just showing both ends of the bridge here and what our closure looks like, just to support the bullet earlier about both ends of that bridge.
So we have time for a couple questions if people have things that have come up that they haven't been able to ask. There's some time for that. I'm looking, I don't see anything new. Okay. I think people have had a chance maybe to ask their questions and we've been going along. So
I'll just say, maybe going back to some of the conversation we heard before Greg spoke, I think we recognize the frustration that people are feeling about sort of thinking that there's not work going on the bridge, or sort of not being able to understand where all these pieces are. So I think we also look, if you have ways for us to communicate that, like we heard from this earlier, we're very open to those ways to communicate how there is a lot of work that's going on. Since we hit that 30% design milestone, we've continued to progress the design. We're moving through this contractor selection process. And so I think it sounds like the folks that raised that question were communicating that information as well, and we really appreciate that. And if there's ever questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we can help continue to give you that information, even if it's between these meetings. And we'll use these and we'll use other channels to get that information out there. But there is a lot of work that continues to go on in getting the bridge back in service.
thanks, Sam. Well, maybe we'll go to our next topic. If things come up, we can certainly open it back up again for conversation about this. But Maureen and Matt are going to talk about low bridge access updates. So we heard a little bit at the beginning that there's some conversation in the community about low bridge access. So we want to make sure everybody knows the latest about what's going on there. So Maureen, to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Angie. I'm Maureen Sheehan. I'm probably a new face for some of you. I'm new to the SDOT team, but I am working on the low bridge access with the policy. And if you submit a request to get access to the low bridge, I'm the one you're sending it to. So it's nice to meet all of you. Next slide. So as you all know, we launched our access request form on the 28th. That came out in 8 different languages, and we have so far gotten a ton of requests for access. The most important, I think, that you all want to hear about is this life-saving medical treatment. We've gotten over 60 applications and have gotten people access to the bridge already. So we'll continue to take those in, but people are using the bridge to go to those appointments. We're also processing over 600 applications for access to the low bridge. Those are applications that are either coming in online or they're coming in through us through the mail. And we are doing our very best to get those all processed and get responses out to people in the next week or so. In support of that effort, we are out in the community working with individuals on at BIPOC-owned businesses on getting them help through access, using the access request form and doing in-language support. So we're really trying to get everyone included in this program. Some timeline updates. So to get access starting June 1st, we need to have your access request form submitted to SDOT by May 15th. Similarly, if that's not going to happen, if you want to get access starting July 1, we need to have that access request form submitted to SDOT on June 15th. As always, applicants, they need to meet the criteria in the policy and receive approval from SDOT before using the low bridge. That's really important. You need to get an email back or a phone call back from SDOT saying that your access has been granted for that following month. Right now, if users have access to the low bridge, that access will continue through May 31st. Most folks will continue to roll over, but the businesses have been asked to exit and re-enter through the front door, and they are doing that in big numbers. So that's going really well. Next slide. So to get all of this information out to the community, you all should have received an outreach toolkit that has all of these materials in it. And we have been spreading the word as best we can to get people to apply or reapply in that case, and letting people know that those new user groups are out there. It's really important that people apply for access if they are one of these new user groups before using the bridge. It is a photo enforcement system where we need to have plates in the system before you use the bridge. The application, the most important piece, is online at that the website listed below. So you can find all of the application materials, access request forms there. Next slide. So as we've been going through this process, we've gotten a lot of questions, some repeat questions that we thought it would be helpful to go through with all of you to make sure that you all are able to inform your community groups. We'll just quickly go through some of them. What types of businesses can qualify? Those are restaurants and retail. And the way that we're verifying those types of businesses is this NAICS code. So that's oftentimes, or it's on the business license, it's with, so we're verifying using that code that we can look up to determine if you're a retail or restaurant business. How many trips do people get a month? That's really based on what type of user this person is. So for businesses, they get 10 round trips per business per month. And when I say round trip, that means going one way across the bridge and then going back across the bridge. That is one round trip. Maritime industrial businesses, they're getting 5 round trips per business day. And then the ILWU members, they get 225 round trips per day. And then the medical users, those, we don't have a trip target. The intent that we did in our estimates is for individuals going to and from those life-saving medical treatments and on-call medical shifts as well. So it's not something that people are doing on a regular basis. that we can give them a trip target. Ideally, if businesses can stay under their trip target, that's even better, but just to give folks a ballpark as to what it is, what access may look like for them, these are those trip targets. When will I get access after I apply? That's kind of the #1 question that we're working through. We are trying to get folks responses within 2 weeks right now because it is the biggest influx of applications that I think we're going to be getting. It's taking a little bit longer, but the hope is by the 15th, people will know if they have access or not by May 15th so that they can start planning for June 1 use of the bridge. Life-saving medical, we are able to upload those plates twice a month. So those individuals will get a response either by the 1st of the month or the 15th of the month on a rolling basis. Next slide. What does urgent mean? Urgent is unplanned and critical to support your business. These are not deliveries. These are not regularly scheduled things. These are once this happens unplanned, you need a supply, something broke, you need to go get a part. That is what we mean by urgent. Always need to reiterate that this is not intended to be used for commuting. So if you're going to a job, you're going to your place of work, and that is a regular commute trip, that is something that is scheduled and planned. So the bridge should not be used for those regular trips. Do you have to live in West Seattle? You do not have to live in West Seattle. Your work needs to be in West Seattle, so your place of business so if you own a business in West Seattle, your business needs to be located in one of those 4 zip codes. Similar to on-call medical providers, the majority of those are going over to First Hill area, to the hospitals, but we do know there are some medical clinics that have on-call providers in West Seattle. So if your clinic is located in West Seattle, then you could get access for on-call medical providers. How long does access last? This was a question I think a lot of businesses and individuals wanted to know. Do I need to reapply every month? For the most part, the answer is no, you do not need to reapply every month. Folks getting life-saving medical treatment, they need to reapply every 3 months. And then the businesses, they just need to apply once, but it's always good to remember and remind folks that access is temporary and can be reduced or revoked at any time. And especially early 2022 when Terminal 5 opens, there's going to be significant reductions in access to the Low Bridge. Next slide. So I'm going to hand this over to Matt Beaulieu.
Hi, we're going to take just a few moments to talk about kind of the background for the city here with volumes. We'll talk about the Low Bridge in particular, as well as provide some insight on violations and the way that the corridor is performing. So just as a reminder, a year ago, we had about 2/3 of our volume across the city down. My apologies. Our volumes are down by about 2/3. Today, we're seeing volumes that are down by about 1/3 across the city. Obviously, some broad generalizations there, but you can see the increase in traffic. You can also see the impacts of our January storms. Next slide, please. Why is that relevant? Well, in the context of our Low Bridge, we're seeing those hours of restriction actually being fairly flat through March and April, with a little bit of increase during the restricted hours. But what we're really seeing is an increasing trend during those off hours. And what that shows us is that people are adjusting their trips to travel while that bridge is available to them, either earlier in the morning or later in the evening. So we're still well below that baseline, particularly during the enforced hours, but we're seeing that people are choosing to kind of modify the way that they're taking their trips to use the times when that bridge is available to them. Not a surprise to those people who transfer themselves back and forth from West Seattle. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've been looking at closely here at the Department of Transportation is the number of notices that are going out to people for using the bridge without authorization. Obviously, this rolled out in January, and we expected that there was going to be kind of a learning curve as people realized that there was an enforcement process that was going to be providing them with notices. People started receiving those first notices, and the daily violation rate decreased significantly. What we have seen in mid-April, we actually saw a spike back up that was a little surprising to us. And we've kind of returned to that 600 or 700, not necessarily citations, but mailings or unauthorized trips a day. About half of those are citations, about half of them are warnings. But what that is telling us is that we've got a few more people choosing to use the bridge without authorization than what we've seen in the past. And so we're watching that closely. To put that in context, we're seeing volumes across the bridge. This is a graph that shows in blue and green the volumes we're measuring across the bridge on an hourly basis. This shows you that we're actually fairly flat across the day in the westbound direction with a little bit of an increase in the afternoon. Not a huge surprise there, I'm sure, for folks. But as we look at that, we're also keeping an eye on what some projected volumes for Terminal 500 opens will look like, and our threshold as far as what we know the corridor can handle in a nice, reliable fashion to be able to recover from events. Obviously, a several-hour long event where we're working on the bridge is a unique situation. But this shows us that we are on par with what we're hoping to be. And I want to just jump back one slide so I can respond to a question from Deb Barker. Deb Barker asked if we're really seeing approximately 500 low bridge violations per day. 500 is actually just, it's on the low end of what we've been seeing the last couple of weeks. We're seeing not necessarily 500 people, because this shows each trip across the bridge, but we're seeing 500 to 700 one-way trips across the bridge that are not authorized. Correct.
Matt, this is Deb Barker. Thank you for that. I'm just astonished at the number. I thought it would have been lower, but wow, thank you very much.
I also was not anticipating that this is what the data was going to show. So I guess that goes to just further the point that you've got to have the data. So as we jump forward, unless there's more questions there. So eastbound, we're seeing a not surprising morning increase in volumes, the 5, 6, 7 o'clock hours continuing. And it's worth noting the green bars on this graph show that morning spike prior to the change in time when the restriction occurs for the low bridge. So people are definitely taking advantage of those extra hours that we provided with our recent changes there. The other thing this shows us is that in the eastbound direction, we are with the Terminal 5 volumes as projected, looking at being a little bit beyond what we think we're confident we can handle out here. So that leads well into the question of what comes next, which I believe Maureen was going to take from us on slide 24, unless there's questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
So operationally, we're going to be, we have those daily, monthly number of trips that we can adjust upwards and downwards. We're going to be monitoring the data very closely, and we're also going to be preparing for those future changes come January 2022. We're going to be starting some outreach and engagement, trying to get some better understanding of how those changes are going to impact people, and then be able to come back to you all with more information.
So I think that's yeah, so we have time for a question. Anne put a question in the chat. And I want to remind folks, like, let's try to use the chat less and just ask our questions and raise hands so that everyone can hear what's going on. So Anne, maybe you want to ask your question out loud instead of having me read it for you.
Yeah, I'm just, the fine for the violations is $75 a day, is that right? or 75. So I just did the math on that. That's $53,000 a day in fines. Where's that money going? I know that we've discussed this before. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, so legislation that authorized these cameras actually says the first thing that happens with money coming in through the cameras is they pay for the installation, operation, electricity cost, installation, maintenance. That comes right off the top. The remaining funds are split 50-50 between a state safety program and a city program for accessibility for accessible and safe transportation. If I remember the exact language, I'd have to double check on the legislation.
Thanks. Deb has her hand raised with a question.
And Matt, just to clarify, the only way to jump that fee from 75 on up is that the legislature has to agree to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that $75 fee is actually set explicitly in the legislation. Part of that was wanting to make sure that as we rolled this out, this is something new within the state, and we wanted to make sure that we did some incremental steps and didn't step too short or too far. So the legislature provided us some very clear guidance on that.
We have another comment in the chat from Newell. Newell, do you want to talk about your question there? It's a long one. I don't want to have to read it for you.
Well, that was just a comment for Dan and others who've raised a question about the vehicle license fee vote and bridge funding, and was just providing some information about that since he'd asked about if any council staffers were here. So wanted to put that in. Happy to discuss it if you'd like.
Yeah, so I'm going to read it out loud just so that folks who maybe aren't reading the chat can hear it. It's about the $20 vehicle license fee legislation. That's the Peterson-Herbold amendment adopted in late April, directed SDOT to provide a list of projects that could be funded by $100 million in bond financing in 2022, with a minimum of $75 million of bridge maintenance and bridge repair projects by September 30, 2021. This schedule allowed for consideration during the 2022 budget process, working toward a 2022 bond sale. That's section 4 of the legislation. The council generally approves a bond sale in November for the following year. For example, 212 million bonds were approved in November and included 100 million for the West Seattle Bridge. At the May 5th meeting, an amendment from Councilmember Strauss was adopted. The above language remains. That is at least 75% towards bridges, with an addition noting the project list should include schedule and when bonds would be necessary. The Strauss Amendment removed a recital expressing intent to dedicate 75% to bridge funding. I suspect that's what people are noticing. That amendment resulted in a unanimous council vote rather than what looked like a split vote that looked likely to be 5-4. So sorry for reading all of that, but not everyone has the same access to the chat. So if there's questions or comments about that, we can talk about it. Any other questions about Low Bridge overall? Okay. So one of the last things that I just wanted to note for folks, and just to circle back on the comment that you had around the, 700 a day, $75 fine. Just wanted to reiterate Matt's comment earlier about half of the notices going out each day are warnings. So maybe cut that number in half would be just if you're trying to ballpark numbers, that's just helpful to know that about half of those are warnings. Okay, I think Megan's got the slides back up again. I think we're going to move to Sarah Zora's update on Reconnect West Seattle. So Sarah, we're gonna shift a little bit and talk about West Seattle. Reconnect.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks for having me today again. I'm Sarah Zora, the Reconnect West Seattle Mobility Manager. So really trying to help mitigate the impacts that you all are feeling from the high bridge closure. I have given Trevor Partap, our civil engineer, a month off this week or this month, a day off of presenting today. He is not taking the whole month off. I should not say things like that, but we have noticed, that traffic volumes, transit ridership, and bicycle volumes have increased, are starting to increase and trend upward a little bit as compared to last year at this time. Megan, if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to hit on some of the home zone construction. So like John Persak said at the beginning, there are some things happening in South Park, Georgetown, and Highland Park. We have completed South Park and Georgetown speed hump installation, and we're still working through Highland Park. Highland Park will be getting about 60 speed humps, and we think that we will get about half the way through those by the end of this week, and hope that we will install all of those 60 by the end of June, excuse me. So we do, in terms of the process that we take these projects, our project development team really does the project development, tries to take data collection and work with community about what solutions they have for the impacts they're feeling and experiencing. And then our project development team works with our transportation operations team to make sure that we're on the same page and really understanding the impacts and the solutions that we are identifying. And then that part of the process goes to our design team and project development. And then that team also works with our transportation operations division to write a work order. Then the work order gets in alignment with the cruise delivery. So there's still a lot of different chains and sequencing of events that have to happen to install all of these projects. So I'm kind of just saying that because John mentioned that their Stay Healthy Street Loop, the pilot project we're putting in Georgetown, half the project to do the install has been complete. We're doing some tree trimming to make sure that we can have our stop signs in correct locations. And so the stop signs and all the other things coming for the Stay Healthy Street will be in progress, John Persak, just to let you know. And I'll work with my communications team as well to see what other ways we can try to keep making sure that we're updating the community outside of our monthly kind of process here, as well as with the specific communities. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Sarah, before you move to the next slide, Paulina had a question. Paulina,
Yes, sorry, Paulina here. I just wanted to confirm Georgetown, they won't have any plans for planting trees because I know it was a very high priority for South Park, but I wanted to confirm that is it not happening there? And also that it won't interfere the stop signs with tree cutting, because I've heard from those concerns as well in both neighborhoods.
Yeah, thanks, Paulina. So with some of the projects that we have proposed for home zones, we do have some trade-offs that have to be thought about in terms of how we install some such project. We do have our North Stay Healthy Street that was implemented in the South Park neighborhood. And during that, and as we are in this process now, our urban forestry division, along with our home zone project team, determined that there was a tree that we do have to remove. It's a tree that has deteriorated in its healthiness. It's pretty much hollow on the inside. So our urban forestry group, who definitely does not ever like to remove trees, has agreed and confirmed that that tree does have to be removed. But that was more for a health reason of the tree, and then the safety impacts that could occur if that tree had fallen. So there will be one tree removed for the Stay Healthy Street and to install a stop sign. With every tree that SDOT has to remove, we replace 2 to 1. We have planted 40 trees in South Park now, and we will be planting more in the next upcoming fall planting season. And at this time, Paulina, I don't think trees are within the proposal for Georgetown, but that's something I can bring back to the home zone team as well to make sure that we're not missing any areas where we could increase that tree canopy. If that helps you, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. Tree canopy is important for both neighborhoods because of the impact, and we have the lowest tree canopy both neighborhoods.
Yeah, especially just to mitigate the impacts that you're feeling now with the bridge closure, but just in general as well. So I think the trees will be quite a good thing to continue to do in both neighborhoods.
And these are mature trees when we're
trees.
replacing, no baby trees, right? Because it
Right.
takes about 30 years. All right, thank you.
So if you go to the next slide, I was going to hit very briefly on West Marginal Way. It's not totally updating on my slides. But for West Marginal Way, we will have the install of the west side sidewalk for the Duwamish Longhouse access and safety improvements will be installed this weekend and next weekend. So be aware that you'll have some traffic control put out there so that we can ensure that the asphalt sidewalk, it's an interim condition that we're going to do for the sidewalk, will get installed from the Duwamish River Trail signal, the existing signal just south of Southwest Idaho Street, to the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center building. And the interim signal and crosswalk is still on schedule for about late August to September timeframe for delivery. And we come back in 2022 with a permanent signal as well as a concrete typical standard sidewalk for that sidewalk access as well. If you go to the next slide, Megan, we're again just talking about our mobility action plan and the stay local kind of messaging right now. We have Sal the Salmon out there with some tips and restaurants, local restaurants for you to try to eat from, I guess you would say. We're also working on the actual physical improvements of the areas within West Seattle by doing the sidewalk beveling program. It's a program that's situated already in our maintenance operations division, is a sidewalk repair program. They already have done some sidewalk beveling in Georgetown, and we're going to do a couple more areas there. We're doing Westwood and Highland Park this week, next week, and for the next couple months. And then we're going to be doing South Park sidewalk beveling in the neighborhood business district, and then other business districts within West Seattle to really help promote better accessibility and walkability within neighborhood business districts so that you can try to utilize your local resources that you have in your communities. And then we have some updates to our travel options stay local website as well, if there's other ways that can help you come up with ideas of staying local while we have this bridge closed. And if you go to the next slide, it will talk more about the schedule. So we're on track for our 2021 projects. We still have a few that are in planning. One example of that is a potential crossing improvement at Dallas Avenue South and 14th Avenue South, and looking at the potential to add a new signal there. So that's a lot of work with King County because we own different parts of the roadway there. So there's still some projects that are in planning. Most are in design, and then all coming in to get aligned into our crew delivery and into construction. That goes with our home zone projects too. In the next few months, probably in July, I'll be giving more of an update on where we are with our 2022 project list and when we anticipate being able to announce what those projects are. Our traffic mitigation, we continuously do all the time, project vetting, delivery of improvements, looking at pavement conditions. And then our mobility action plan, we'll have more updates again coming up here as we're in our process of hiring our transportation demand management consultant team to really help with that behavior change and education about how different ways to get around. So again, that will be coming up in the next few months here. And that is my wrap on what we have going on for Reconnect West Seattle.
Thanks, Sarah. Questions for Sarah and her team? So let's see, two things that have come up in the chat as we're getting close to wrapping up the content. Wanted to remind you all about the reflection form. So if you take a minute to fill that out, that would be great. And then John Persak put a note in about the missing link bike project that's not pictured on West Marginal would remove a lane from a major truck street, and the lane removal from that freight route is a significant environmental impact. SDOT should pursue a SEPA analysis of that piece, and also container port element of the comp plan is an issue. So I wanted to just put that out there for folks to consider.
Thank you. And I will say, in terms of West Margin Way, the roadway proposals that we have, we have been saying that the decision would be made in Q2. We still anticipate that. Right now, we're working on trying to set up a meeting between the Freight Advisory Board and the Bike Advisory Board with Sam to really talk about the project from both those two perspectives, and the board's members that are on the team there to really have a good sense of what's going on. And so we still anticipate a decision will be coming. Thanks.
And some folks in the chat have noted agreement with that comment from John Persak. So also wanting to encourage folks to, if you're willing, to be able to speak your comments out loud so that folks who may not be able to access the chat can hear that as well. Any comments? I mean, Sarah, this is it for you on Reconnect West Seattle. So I think really our next slide is kind of our next steps wrap up. So we're opening it for any questions or comments you have about anything that we've talked about today. Commissioner Steinbrook.
Yeah, I just want to voice, I'm sorry, did I unmute? Yeah, I want to voice my strong agreement with John Persak regarding the need for grade separated bike and ped from West Marginal Way. It's a safety issue at the highest critical importance, and it's also a freight mobility issue. I don't think that the question of costs when we're considering 50 to 100-year infrastructure investment should drive us in the wrong direction of mixing bikes with trucks. It's not going to work, and it's going to be very unsafe. So I want to put that on the line here and now, and we'll continue to work through our staff on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, topics you want to bring up, reflections you want to make? The floor is open. Okay.
Wow, we have a quiet group
how
today.
long? You never know how long to wait and have it be silent. I know.
Maybe everybody wants to go outside locally and stay enjoying the sun a little bit.
Yeah. So I think if we don't have any other comments or things to discuss, maybe we move to the next step slide. And I think Mayor Nichols, you were going to cover kind of our what's on tap for our next CTF meeting, correct?
Yes.
Great, thank you. It's all you.
The big news next meeting will be the selection of a contractor so that we know who is going to be responsible for delivering the project by second quarter of next year. We'll get another low bridge and high bridge update. We're going to continue to monitor the projects and how they're moving along, and the mobility action plan as well. So it'll be similar to these last couple of meetings, making sure that we continue to be informed as to the progress being made. But I think that contractor selection will be the highlight of the June 10th meeting. That'll be our Thursday meeting. It'll be at 4 in the afternoon. So please make sure you've got the right time and day on your calendar. The bridge replacement study introduction. I'm not sure what all that is going to cover, Angie, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's some, maybe one of the SDOT folks on the call can give a little bit of preview of that bridge replacement study introduction.
I can do that, Angie.
Thanks, Heather.
Wait, you mean you don't have all the details?
I mean, I can make something up. That's
fine. So we at SDOT felt like it was a good time for us to at least start the process of thinking about what a replacement bridge would look like when we eventually do have to replace the West Seattle Bridge. We all know that that is a thing that is going to happen, hopefully not for a while, but we wanted to get a head start on that. The other element of that is that just out of an abundance of caution, we wanted to take that partial replacement. Do you remember we were talking about the rapid replacement months ago? Can somebody nod? Okay, good. We thought we would take that option to 30% design just in case the worst happens and the repair fails for some reason. So we are acting out of an abundance of caution on that element, and also just preparing for the future on the long-term replacement.
Great, thank you. So thank you all for your participation. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Paulina just stepped away from her desk for a minute, but on behalf of Paulina and myself, we really appreciate your hanging in there with us and look forward to seeing you in June. Take care.